see if I can't remember this entire book. I should be able to. I wrote it. But let's see if I can remember beginning to end what happens. Okay, it begins. He is... Where does it begin? I believe the main character is celebrating getting 13,000 subscribers on YouTube. And he's doing a live stream. And it's really awkward. And he starts the live stream and there's really no one on. And he doesn't know what to do, so he shuts it off immediately. And then as parents, they give him a warning to be back by dinner when he's leaving, so he hops on his bike and he goes across town on his bike to a baseball field that's like wild and unkempt. And his goal is to just go meet his friends, and they're going to talk about their social medias. And the friend meets him there in his car, and his friend James, the main character's name is Nick. His friend's name is James. Got it. He talks about how he does Twitch streaming and how he was on it all morning. And they kind of talk about this idea of doing Project California, which is to move out to California, where they think all these YouTubers are kind of in LA, and then they can come together and do collaborations and boost their channels. And the main character is just hesitant, and he's like, no. He's like, I don't think I can go to California or whatever. So then they're like, oh, whatever, they leave. They're disappointed. And do I still look like that? Am I getting older? Just kidding, I don't smile like that. You ready? Yeah. That was my Tinder profile. So, he comes home, and they're at dinner, and his dad tells him he needs to get a job, and how his dad works a lawn mowing crew, and how if he starts work that next week, he can have a weed whipping job, and by the following summer, he could be running a lawnmower. And he's like, tries to tell his dad he has a job, he's a YouTuber. And his dad yells at him, and is like, I'm not gonna have someone not working in my house. He gives him an ultimatum that he has to either join the crew or get out of the house. And so he calls up his friend and he's like, screw it, let's go to California. So they get up all the money that they have together and they plan this trip out to California. And they go all the way out there. Meanwhile, they have this big plan to film themselves along the way at all these different places. They have like a 1 month planned of just filming themselves heading to California. And after like 5 days of their 1 month plan, they realize their views are bombing and it's not working and they're blowing through their money. So they decide to just screw it, we're heading straight to California. So then they get to California and they end up in the tiniest little shack underneath this mansion, basically. Like, it used to be the guest quarters for this mansion, and it's just in the shadow of this giant thing. And on the opposite side of town, you have to go through Skid Row to get to where he actually has a cousin who also is a YouTuber, who's a health and wellness YouTuber, and her husband, or his cousin Daisy, and then her cousin, what is it, Rick? It's a modern day remake of The Great Gatsby. Whatever Daisy's name is in The Great Gatsby, I think it's Rick. He has an exercise YouTube channel, and they're really popular and blowing up, and successful. And so his friend wants him to go out there and use his cousin as for collaboration. James does, and then Nick does not want to use his cousin. He's like, we're here to find people, let's find people. And I'm not here to use my cousin, basically. So they spend a while in California, a couple weeks or whatever. I can't remember how long. It wasn't too long, but it was long enough where money strains start to come in, and they start looking at what jobs to do. That finally Nick is like, okay, I'll contact my cousin, but we're not going to do a collab. We're just going to ask if they can kind of feed them into the social pipeline and let them know some people. So they go visit the cousin, and they agree to the cousin's like, no, we're going to do a collab, basically. I'm going to put you in a video, and we both are. And then you'll have 2 collaborations under your belt. So they go home knowing they've set up a collab. And Nick's uncomfortable with it, but his cousin basically forces it on. He's like, I am your family. You came all the way out here. Just let us help you. And so Nick agrees. And they go home. And meanwhile, Nick sees the shadow, I think, kind of deal of a man in the mansion up above on the hill. He kind of spots a glimpse of just something odd, like a figure that's just seems extravagant to him. And so then he goes to his cousin's, and he does a workout video with her husband, and then she makes them a drink that's essentially water with herbs in it. And so they do that, and then the husband, we'll call him Rick wants to go take them out in the town to meet people after. So he puts on this cologne, and it kind of sets off Daisy, why are you putting on cologne when you're going out without me? And he's like, I'm sponsored by this cologne or whatever. It was free. Why would I not use this free cologne? They sent it to me. I have to use it. So it's like, whatever. The argument kind of settles, and James and Nick stand there awkwardly. And then they go out on the town. And they go to these different places. And at the end of the night, they end up at a table with a bunch of YouTubers who have big followings, and they're at a club, in the VIP. So they're meeting there's these 2 brothers who do wild stunts, and they're kind of notorious on YouTube kind of deal. And they're talking to them, they're hanging out. Meanwhile, they're having these girls come to the booth, and Nick and James end up flirting with this girl, and she is kind of bouncing between them or whatever. And she's asking a lot of questions, and so they're talking away, and that's when Nick, what's the girl's name? I can't remember. We'll call her love interest. Gosh. So, love interest is there asking a lot of questions. Meanwhile, Nick spots Rick on the dance floor and he's getting hot and heavy with some girl that they had in the VIP, and they're being a little too friendly, and then he actually kisses her, and Nick's like, oh my gosh, he's just kissed someone who's not his wife, which is also my cousin. And so he's like, what the hell? And they're like, what happened? They're like, Rick just kissed some chick. And then the love interest is real curious about this, and they're trying to figure out where Rick went, because they left the dance floor, and Nick spots him heading into the ladies' room with the girl that was at VIP. And then so he's like, oh my gosh, what do I do? So he goes home. He's afraid to tell. He's like, he has mixed emotions, because on the one hand, they made all these new connections with big YouTubers that they can collaborate with, and on the other hand, he just saw his wife get cheated on by her husband, and he's like distraught and doesn't know what to do, and he's like, just decides to keep it to himself, and he's like, I don't want anything to do with it. So he goes home, but the next day there's a report in the news of the infidelity at the club in the drama section or wherever, and love interest, we'll just call her reporter or love interest. Love interest is actually a reporter, and Nick recognizes her name or her photo or something. At some point, somehow he recognizes her, and he's mentioned, Rick's mentioned, and Daisy calls, and she's all distraught. Or no, Rick calls, and Daisy's all distraught, and he can hear just stuff breaking in the background, and they're like, you need to get over here now. So Nick has to race over, and he ends up, and James is like, I'm not going over there. And James goes surfing, so James leaves him. So he goes there, and Daisy and Rick both come and confront him in the driveway. Like, Rick beats him to it, and he's like, you better not tell her anything happened. Just tell her nothing happened. And meanwhile, Daisy comes out, and it's like the house is trashed. Windows are broken. Stuff's thrown everywhere. And Daisy's like, what happened? She's like, did he cheat on me or no? And then so it's like, Nick is just staring between his cousin and Rick, and they're both just staring at him. And in his mind, he's seeing Rick just beat him to death. And he's like, nope, nothing happened. And then he kind of gaslights his cousin, or helps Rick gaslight her. And he just agrees that, nope, there was no cheating. He was with me the whole night, whatever. And Daisy's kind of non-believing. And then Rick's like, see, you can't believe these dramatized tabloids. So Nick goes home feeling horrible and thinking he did the wrong thing, and he's just kind of distraught with himself. Meanwhile, he gets this invitation in the mail that's just like gold embroidered, just an envelope that's inviting him to a creators party, and the address is in the mansion next door. And so he's like, okay. So he goes, he tells James, and him and James are like, kind of forget about their troubles, and they're like, well, we get to go to this mansion, we get to go to this creators party, like, what is going on? It's so mysterious. So that kind of distracts them, and they decide to get dressed up and go see what's what over there. So they go over there, and this party's, it's filled with people, like huge YouTubers there, and there's this mysterious guy, the guy who owns the place. They're all talking about I think it was Jason Cross or something. I can't remember his name. It was in the rough draft, it was literally Gatsby, but I think I changed it to Jason. It was kind of a nod to David Dobrik, because this is supposed to kind of, in my head, it was like represent like a fictional version of like that kind of a vlog squad deal. And then Jason Nash was the head of, or he wasn't the head, but he's like David Dobrik's right-hand man at the time. So kind of in the honor of the vlog squad, had the older guy who was Jason Nash. That's why I named Gatsby Jason, because he was older than everyone else, kind of. And so this party's crazy, and Nick meets this guy, and he says how much he wanted to meet him. And he kind of says how he wants to collab with Nick's cousin Daisy. And so Nick's kind of uncomfortable with this, but he's like, what do you mean? And he's like, more or less like, I will make you the man of the night. I will work with you if you can finagle. He's like, I don't even want to collab. Just give me a meeting. Let me sit down and talk to her. And he's like, and if nothing comes of it, he's like, that's fine. All I want is just that chance. And he's like, and I will let you be kind of the man of the night at the center of all the videos. He's like, the point of this night is to get a bunch of videos made. And he's like, you'll be at the center of them all. And Nick's like, okay. And then like, that's all it takes. Like, Jason grabs him and he's like, hey, everybody. Like, before Nick can even second thought. And so now in the back of his head, he's like, I have to like coerce my cousin to meet this stranger. This seems kind of wrong. But he's also getting thrown into these videos all of a sudden. And so he spends the night in this mansion making videos. I believe this is when he sees the reporters actually there, and he confronts her, and she's like a little, I don't know, like defensive or whatever. They kind of have an argument. But anyway, he goes home and he wakes up the next day, and he's he is kind of blowing up. Like, he has a couple thousand more subscribers, and then he realizes he's in all these trending videos, and his channel's starting to get subscribers. In his latest video, he kind of makes a video of that night himself, I think. Anyways, he uploads a video, and his last video is kind of blowing up. So then Jason's trying to get him to meet his cousin, and Nick is hesitant. And Jason, instead of like forcing his hand, is like, well, we're shooting a video. Like, come shoot the video. He's like, I'll put you in the thumbnail. And so he ends up shooting this video with Jason, and it is like the main event. All these other videos were people smaller YouTube channels or whatever, kind of like the side of the vlog squad, but like, you know, there's like the main head video, and this was gonna be that. And so it's like this thing where they die in a swimming pool and all jump in or whatever. Anyway, so Jason ends up being the one who jumps in the pool first, and that video gets on the YouTube trending page and gets to be #1 trending, and that really blows up his channel. So then Nick sets up for Jason and Daisy to meet. So he invites Daisy over, and she agrees, and he doesn't tell her about James, but he knows when she's gonna be there, and he has it faked, like, or Jason has it faked out, like he's gonna show up and ask for sugar or like something from the house. And so when Daisy's there, he comes in kind of the back door, and he's nervous, but then he meets Daisy, and they both recognize each other, and they hit it off, and they both kind of push Nick to the side, and he just kind of feels like a third wheel there. And so after that, Daisy leaves, and Jason gives Nick a bunch of tips, and he says that him and his roommate James should start a prank war with each other and film themselves pranking each other for content. And so Nick begins this thing where Nick is pranking James, and in response, James pranks Nick, but each one kind of gets worse and worse, and it gets out of hand, and it starts to get personal. And this is like happening in the background, like as the book's going on. These pranks just keep going. And meanwhile, Nick is filming with James, but at the same time, Daisy she's actually starting to show up at Nick's house unannounced at the same time that Jason's showing up at Nick's house unannounced. And Nick is like not comfortable with that. Like, you guys are clearly setting up rendezvous with each other. And then like it gets to the point where Nick would just see Daisy's car parked in his driveway and she wouldn't even be there because she just got out and went to the mansion. And so Nick is like, again, uncomfortable, and he's sitting there and like has an encounter with Rick where he's like, I don't know if I can say something. And so meanwhile, Jason throws another big bash, and he invites Daisy and Rick. And there's this balcony with a glass wall in his house overlooking like his backyard and the pool and stuff. And Jason talks Rick into going to get interviewed by another popular YouTuber who does YouTube channel interviews. And meanwhile, he sneaks out back with Daisy, and Nick happens to catch them kissing. And as he's getting confronted by the reporter girl, and he's getting confronted by Rick, comes up asking where Daisy is, and he can both see Daisy and see Jason and Daisy making out from where he's standing, and he's just like, I haven't seen her. And so he's trying to keep Rick from turning and looking out the window, and so he kind of talks Rick away, and then they leave, and the party ends or whatever. And then Nick does some more stuff. His channel's just blowing up, and Nick buys a fancy sports car, and he actually races Jason's car, and then a fan almost steps out. And for some reason, Nick gets in the car and he's going somewhere with Jason, and a fan steps out in front of them and almost gets hit because they recognize his car, and they just wanted to like be on a video. So they're like, hey, like as a fan, they stop his car. And so like they're lucky they stop in time. So meanwhile, Nick's got this new car, and he affords so much stuff, but James's channel is growing, but nothing like Nick's. And James is getting resentful, and the prank war is just getting out of hand to the point where Nick accidentally hurts James. He puts like a bucket full of paint over his bedroom door, so when he opens it, it'll fall. But the bucket doesn't dump, it just lands on his head and like causes a huge gash. And so that like blows up their friendship, and he leaves Nick alone. And Jason and Daisy begin planning to kind of run away together. And Nick starts dating the reporter. And so kind of in the culmination of everything, Nick, Daisy, Jason, and the reporter go on a double date downtown. And they end up getting filmed by someone who's like a paparazzi guy. And the paparazzi takes pictures, and Jason, instead of acting normal and backing off, he grabs Daisy and kisses her right in the camera. And Daisy slaps him and is like, what are you doing? And he's like, let's just move on. So then they go for a walk, and by the end of the walk, Rick is calling Daisy, and their phones are blowing up, and they're like, these photos are already on the internet. And Rick's like, what is this photo of you kissing another man? And so Daisy freaks out, wants to go home. So they all head back to Nick's house where their cars are. And when they get there, Rick is there. And Rick and Jason confront each other. And Rick starts saying how they built a YouTube channel and how he just used TikTok to come to fame, and how he learned about him and how he was just some person who made vines back in the day. And then his channel got all destroyed when Vine got sold, or when Vine got taken off the internet. So then he used TikTok to boost himself onto YouTube, and how it wasn't as honorable, whatever, having this kind of an argument. And meanwhile, Daisy freaks out and she jumps into Jason's car, and Jason chases after her. I think Jason punches Rick, or Rick punches Jason, or Jason threatens to punch Rick. Either way, it makes Daisy freak out, and she jumps into Jason's running car. And so Jason jumps into the car with her. And then so they speed off, go speeding away. And then meanwhile, the reporter's there too, and she says, like, hey, they're live streaming. Like, Jason has a camera in his car to live stream when he's driving, but it's like facing outward. And they're like, right now they are live on the internet, and you can hear them arguing as they're just speeding into Skid Row, like out of the nice neighborhood there, and like heading towards Daisy's neighborhood, but they got to go through Skid Row. And then so they're like trying to see where they go, but as they're watching, they see a fan that recognizes Jason's car again and steps out in front of the car. And this time the car doesn't see him, and it just nails the person. And then so then they stop, and they're like, you can hear him distraught, and the live stream like cuts off. And so everyone at the house, Nick and the reporter and Rick, they all hop in a car and they chase after this vehicle. And they're trying to find it. They're going through Skid Row. They're trying to find it. Finally, they find a crowd of people. And all there is just this person on the ground, and the police with kind of a tarp over a body, but there's no Daisy and Jason. The car's gone. It fled the scene. But everyone knows who hit the lady because they were live streaming to thousands upon thousands of people. And so there's this person who's named Mistress Myrtle, who has her own YouTube channel, who's reporting. And this Mistress Myrtle is kind of announcing that Jason just hit this bystander. So then they try to find him all day, and they can't find him. And so eventually Rick calls and says Daisy's home. And so Nick goes home after seeing Daisy, and she's like, goes to Rick and like holds Rick and is like, oh, like whatever, loving him. And then so he comes back home to his house, and Jason jumps out of a bush and is like, hey, you see what happened? And he's like, he just wants to make sure that Nick is not gonna rat Daisy out. He's like, as far as anyone's concerned, I was driving that car. It was me. You didn't see anything. And he's like, I just wanted to make you know that. And he's like, I'm gonna turn myself in, and then, or whatever, we're gonna get out of it. Somehow he's envisioning himself running away with Daisy. And meanwhile, Daisy reports that it was all Jason, and that she had nothing to do with the accident, even though Nick knows she was driving. And so Jason wants her to be out of it. And so he's cool with her blaming him, and she wants to be out of it, so she is blaming him, and he's accepting that. And then in the midst of it all, YouTube decides to delete his channel, and then Daisy leaves him for Rick. And so he doesn't have a channel, and he basically loses Daisy, and then his TikTok, everything is just deleted because he showed someone getting killed and ran them over with his car. And so all his social media is like basically taken off the internet. And once Daisy officially goes back to Rick and denounces him, Nick goes to check on him because he has a bad feeling. And he sees Jason, he's in his house calling for him because he won't answer his phone. And he sees out that big window, Jason standing at the pool filming himself on camera. And then he pulls out a gun, and Nick's slamming on the window trying to like scream at him. And then Jason shoots himself, and he falls into the pool with the camera. And so Nick goes running down there. He grabs him, he pulls him out of the pool, calls 911, starts doing CPR, but it's kind of like there's nothing we can do. And he looks at the pool that's like filled with blood, and it reminds him of that first stunt he did where they poured dye in the pool. The first one where he was the most popular guy. Anyway, so then he goes to his funeral, and no one's there except for this old, like, raggedy looking dude he comes into the church, and he announces like he was Jason's old friend. My lip is so dry, I just bit it. Get off of there. We need chapstick. So the only person shows up at the funeral is Jason's dad, and then so Nick gives a story on how he's actually a good guy and helped him or whatever. And this guy comes in the back, and he says he's an old person from Vine who was friends with Jason. And when Jason blew up on Vine, this other guy blew up on Vine too. And they used to be part of their own little squad. But now the other guy's homeless and, not on anything. And he actually pulls out a camera and starts filming himself, like vlogging the funeral. So Nick charges him and like shoves him out in the parking lot and like threatens to beat him up if he's gonna, like, you're not vlogging at Jason's funeral for clout. And so then the funeral's over and they bury Jason. And then it fast forwards to the future. Meanwhile, the reporter had left him because it was like too much drama. Her job wanted her to report on Jason, on everything that happened, and she's like, I can't be involved in this. I'm gonna lose my job. So, kind of in the epilogue, the main character goes home and he's mowing lawns for a living. And it's like a hot summer day, and he's just mowing lawns. But then he goes home, and he's got a camera set up, and it's this super popular YouTuber there is like, hey, we're doing this charity rock, paper, scissors competition. So he joins and he does rock, paper, scissors against James, and James beats him. And James like, hey, I'll come visit you sometime. And like, okay, and he's like, I wish you the best in this competition. Hopefully you can win it and win the charity money for people. So then he signs off and he checks his YouTube channel, which is now all about him mowing lawns and stuff, and sees it's kind of blowing up, and he's like happy about it. So he gets in his car and he drives back to the baseball field he rode his bike to in the beginning, but the baseball field's all cleaned up. And it's all mowed, and it was overgrown before. I guess I should have said that. Now it's not overgrown. So he goes there, and the community members start showing up, and the people are there, and it turns out he's hosting a baseball game, and a lot of people from the community are all showing up to join in the game, and he's just kind of there watching. Like, he uses social media to put it together and save the old baseball field. So as he's sitting there watching play baseball, someone calls to him, and he turns, and it's the reporter out of California. And she's like, hey, the company I was working for wanted all that drama and stuff. She's like, I just want to do honest reporting. She's like, you think a paper here will let me? He's like, I don't know. She's like, you think I could stay with you for a while I figure it out? And he's like, you can stay with me as long as you want. And so she kind of comes up and hugs him or kisses him or whatever, and they lean against this tree and watch the baseball game go on. And that is The Great Influencer. That's kind of how it ends. Let's see here. You can get the tree. Here's the last paragraph. You ready? Both batter and baseball reached the third baseman in the same moment. The adult held both hands out straight from his sides. Means safe. But that is front to back the summary of The Great Influencer. A 100 years later remake of The Great Gatsby, replacing rum running and prohibition with social media. Anyway, if you like that, try checking out another book. I got like 9 other books I wrote. Always writing books. Or read it for yourself. There's a lot of detail in between. It's pretty good. Do a comparison to that in The Great Gatsby. All right.